I appreciate it. So I have something that I wrote that I want to read before we get started, but I will tell you both, Pastor and Rabbi. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this subject as part of our series is because when I was working on my dissertation, the idea of grace came up a lot as I was doing my study, and it wasn't necessarily that the administrators that I was working with were talking about grace explicitly, but that when I was sitting down having a conversation with my uncle, he said to me, he was like, "That's grace that you're talking about." And so it really kind of just sent me down this path of really wanting to discover what grace is, and how grace could be utilized more in a school setting, and trying to connect the dots, right? Knowing that grace as a spiritual concept is not often talked about in schools because it is a spiritual concept. And so if you would just give me a few minutes, let me read this initial piece, and then we can get into kind of defining what grace is, and talking about its application in school and in life in general. So I wrote down in preparation. Recently, I visited a bunch of different school sites as part of my advocacy and work with families in the Sacramento area. The buzzwords that often come up during my visits are equity, diversity, and inclusion. Here at Touro University, we even have a program that is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program. And so while most schools have a grasp on how to define diversity and inclusion, I find that the most difficult concept for schools to define is equity. Equity is often seen as a path to all students receiving the resources they need to be successful, yet the most common approach to infusing equity into our schools and practices is bound and constrained by notions of equality. What is problematic about this approach is that equity, in addressing inequity and injustice, must reconceptualize our notion of what is fair and what is just. In this talk, my goal is that we can discuss how grace as a moral and spiritual necessity for leadership can be used. Grace, then, for me, is an ingredient that allows for the authentic expression of equity and notions of social justice in school while resisting those policies and actions which are ineffective. In essence, in a world that is bearing witness to social movements, social unrest, where folks who are on the margins are sending powerful messages to those who are in charge, I believe that an ethic of grace, or grace in itself, speaks to whether action and change will be temporary or whether it can be transformative. And so I wanted to just read that real quick to start us off, but I was hoping that you both could help us understand a little bit what is grace, since we talk about it so often.
Rabbi, you want to go? Or? Go ahead.
So first of all, I want to thank you for including me, and for welcoming me, and welcome to everybody who's participating as well. My name is Elchanan Tenenbaum, campus rabbi, and also I am part of the Chabad movement in Napa Valley as well. I'll keep that very, very brief. I appreciate what you said, and it's very thought-provoking. And there's definitely a lot about that in the Jewish teachings and in practice and philosophy and all around, and a lot, and it's truly based on the teachings and the story of Genesis, which is truly a guide to all of us. And it's interesting because being thoughtful about this, I realize that a lot of things that I try to share and inculcate are based around that. what I would say, the first thing is the idea of grace to oneself, and the realization that who I am. And it says in Genesis that man was created, humans were created in the image of God. So that is step one. If I am a reflection of God, that's my personal grace that I have. And that's where the Genesis is. That's where the Genesis begins going forward from there. I guess I'll jump to maybe the application in day-to-day life, and particularly in schools, and particularly in schools where it's the place of our education, but not just the education, which is important, not just the education of information, but it's really the education, so to speak, of grace, of gracefulness, and in Yiddish, which is the Jewish language, or there's a thing called to be a mensch. I don't know if anyone heard about it. Be a mensch is essentially be a man, be an upstanding person, be an upstanding human. All the education in the world cannot create a mensch, cannot create that. That is something that is built in on the peripherals of school. If school is only about education, then we're missing out on how to create a man or a person or an upstanding human being. So those two things come the same. I don't know how much you want me to discuss, or if we can let the pastor continue, but I can go on if you want.
Well, I will also jump in. Thank you, Rabbi.
Sure.
And thank you for the invite to this. When I saw grace, I just got excited. It is, and to the Rabbi's point, it's God's unmerited favor. It is not earned. It is given. And if we must apply it to equity and inclusion and diversity, but so much more in equity because it speaks to the core of man's value. If you value one another, you're going to show grace to one another. But that starts by value yourself, to the Rabbi's point. Matthew records the words of Jesus in the New Testament: suffer the children to come unto me and forbid them not, for such is the kingdom of God. I mean, suffer means to give them space, allow them to participate, allow them to come, make room for them. And that's exactly what grace does. It makes room. Recently I have a young adult son, and I was off in college, and it was kind of having some challenges, and I had to keep going down where he was in Southern California, and in my mind rescue him from one challenge to the next. And as I was going down frustrated, I heard the Spirit speak to me and said, this is what grace looks like. Grace goes over and over and over again. Grace gives and gives and gives again. Grace allows and permits itself over and over again. And so whether we apply it in our daily life with the people we work with, to our education system, it is like we give you permission, we give you allowance, we suffer you to come, and we will wait. That's what grace waits on you. We will wait on you as you come. And so and again, it is not earned. It is simply given. Thank you.
Pastor, I want to build on that. It is not earned. It is given. It makes room. All of those different ideas. And if I am a person of privilege or a person of advantage, I feel like that is unfair to me, that someone sitting next to me that is getting all of these opportunities over and over and over again that they have not necessarily earned, it just seems like something is wrong with that sort of scenario. How would you, or how would you, Rabbi or Pastor, how would you all respond to that notion that what you're describing is something that is inherently unfair?
Yeah, he that is forgiven much also forgives. And so I think it's hard for someone of privilege to wrap their mind around unmerited favor until someone, because if they come from a place where I believe I deserve this, or I earned this, or I was allotted this because of my pedigree and privilege. But to someone who's like, I didn't deserve this, I didn't earn this, and this was granted to me, forgiven, that person's able to forgive much. It's like where much is given, much is required. And so that's where grace comes in. And I imagine it's hard for someone to wrap their mind around a place of grace if they haven't been seen it dealt in their own life, where I needed this opportunity, I needed this pass, I needed this to have access to this place of privilege that I don't deserve. And again, and I'll just mention this: it's like love. Love is an action word. You give it away. Jesus said, "You'll know my disciples because they have love one towards another." And when the Bible says, husbands, love your wives, respect your husband. It is, you give it regardless of whether you think they deserve it or not. When our children have a bad day from school, we don't not feed them because it's a basic need. And so grace is a basic human need that has to be granted. But again, I think it's challenging for someone who comes from a place of privilege to wrap their mind around that, where they were in need of something that they believe they didn't deserve or haven't earned. Thank God for grace.
Rabbi, you have any thoughts on that as well?
You're on mute.
There's been an initiative over time to create a moment of silence in schools. And you can look that up, a moment of silence. It's been a congressional movement tied together with Education Day. And the concept there is to have a moment of silence, 60 seconds, 1 moment, 1 minute in schools, in public schools, where you cannot have traditional prayer, but you could have a moment of silence. There's a couple of things. First of all, a moment of silence is universal. Everyone can have that. What does a moment of silence do? A moment of silence gives everyone to connect to the higher power, however they see it. That is the idea behind it. So when we are connecting, when each individual connects to the higher power, to God, or however you see that, in connection to grace, to realize that as I guess as a human, we have a responsibility. At the same time, as it mentions in the Torah and the Bible, that we each have our individual mission in life. On a daily basis, when we're connecting, even if it's for 60 seconds, what is my mission as an individual? There's two things that happen. First of all, I'm able to reflect myself as someone who's unique, even though I'm one of 7 billion. At the same time, I look at the other person with that same reflection, no matter who they are. So we ask, what is the power? What is the true power of that? How transcending is that? It's very transcending. Because when I can reflect on myself like that, and I can reflect on the next individual regardless of where that person comes from, then it's a very different playing field. this is something that has been in the process. There's different states that have implemented a moment of silence, of prayer, or whatever you want it to be. But that idea is to have a direct connection to the higher power, individual connection, silent, in your own way to communicate. By doing that, we're able to draw that down and then reciprocate that and look at the other person who's doing the same exact thing, having the same exact connection, essentially, with silence, and to relate to that person on that level. And that's really, as humans, a core thing that we have. Faith, a belief system, however you want it to be. But that is a foundation that we are on an equal. There's equality there. Everyone has 60 seconds of silence the same exact way. That is the beginning. That is the beginning.
I wanted to ask you both, I appreciate both of your responses. As an educator, or as a educational leader, if I believe in grace and the power of grace, and particularly believe in just the possibilities of providing another chance, right? Chance to the nth power. Where do I find the courage and the fortitude to do that in the face of opposition that feels like children can reach a limit on the number of opportunities they get to essentially behave like adults?
Well, thank you for that, because I'm thinking about when I'm going to put my young adult out. When would his grace run out? So thank you for allowing me to reflect in this time. I heard a study the other day that children arrive at 20, almost 20, that their brains don't fully develop till age 25. I said, okay, you got a year and a half, dude. Your grace is your grace is on the timetable. But the reality is I don't think you can fully appreciate unmerited favor until you look internally and say, where have I been given grace, and where have I been given favor, and where have I been given exceptions, and where have I think about it, and I'll digress for a moment. If you ever had to make a U-turn in the middle of the road, and it's illegal and it's not right and you shouldn't do it, but you do, because I'm going the wrong way and I make this U-turn, and the person behind you just blows their horn and a rage. And the first thought that comes to my mind is you're acting like you have never done this before. You act like you have never had to make a U-turn. You're behaving as if you have never had a do-over. Or you never had to. You were in a hurry and had to get in line, or needed to be in line in front of someone in the grocery store. It's favor. It's grace. It's granted. When should we stop it? How often should you forgive your brother? 7 times? No, 70 times 7. It doesn't run out. But you can only, I believe, justly equate that to the grace that's been given to you. And so when you recognize, no, I've had to make U-turns. When you recognize, no, I needed to ask someone you don't mind if I get in line ahead of you? I'm in a hurry here. We've all needed grace granted to us, and I think that's the only real way that we're able to really give it out over and over again, because we recognize that we needed it over and over again, regardless of to what powers you have as a teacher, instructor, or leader. You recognize you still needed grace, and then therefore it allows you to give it out, and hopefully in a graceful way.
I guess I'll add to that, but that what we spoke about in the school, sort of where that was the platform here, right? Part one. There's really part two, which is in the home, or what the pastor was saying as well, internally, which is part two and part three. Part three is that really we truly reflect on that as adults, as you were saying, and those are three parts that are really not separable. We're not throwing the responsibility of making a mensch, if you will, or developing grace fully on the teacher or in the school system. It's a partnership. It's a partnership with the home, and then it's a partnership with that maturity that we come along with as adults, that we give into we give to the children as well, by reflecting or whatever the case is. We all have that on every level, whether it's something to do with driving or anything else. We have that ability to reflect on that, where there's many things that we have that are innate, that we are created with. We look at the Torah, the Bible, as sort of a universal law for civilization. It's been around quite a while. It's gone through many civilizations, but at the end of the day, the human nature always remains the same, regardless of what it is. So what we're thinking is something that someone was thinking about 2,000 years ago in a similar situation. Those processes are the same. And those teachings that we want to do always remain the same. But I would say again, there's a certain partnership that goes along. There's a partnership of the home that is necessary, and as well as that certain maturity of recognition of ourselves and our responsibilities, our sort of failures. We all have that. I have that like anybody else. And using that as a guide to teach or to show an example with that.
You both bring up very good points, and you both brought in the home into your answer. The next logical question for me is, where does love fit in to all of this? And let me preface that question by also saying that, there are varying feelings when it comes to the concept of love and where it fits in education. There are some people who feel like this is a job, and in that it is a job, love has no place or value in it. But I almost, listening to both of you talk, I almost feel like there is no grace without love. And so how does love fit into this picture that the both of you are so eloquently describing for us here?
Sure. Love is patient. It is kind. It is not puffed up. It does not think of itself. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Love protects, perseveres. Love never fails. And so when people fall out of love from each other, what they're really saying is, I didn't work on loving, because love never fails. It continues to give itself away. And what I love most about it, keeps no record of wrongs. And so it's not keeping a scoreboard of what you did and didn't do right. It continues to give itself. And so if you apply it into education, of course, we have jobs to do as instructors and teachers and people that have deadlines and guidelines to follow. We just simply, what love says is just consider the conditions. Love says contemplate the circumstances around you. That's all. And it allows you, as opposed to, and in real life, there are deadlines, right? If you miss a train, a plane, automobile, you suffer the consequences. So we teach students, there are deadlines, and there has to be hard stops along the way. But all those lessons should be given in love. an instruction. Yeah, you know you missed the deadline, but love says, let this be a teachable moment here, and how can we expand on this so that I will consider what you had going on in your life. So love also says we don't apply my circumstance to theirs. In my day, we used to do this. When I was your age, I did this. When I was in your situation, situations have changed, circumstances have changed. Love and grace, it simply considers all of that in play, and it is able to give itself again. That's what it does.
So I think we'll circle around a little, go back a little in this question of love, which is very important. And love has many faces. When you're stopping a kid from running into the street, you're doing it out of love. Someone will look at you and it does not look good. As we grow up, love has a very different look. The love in our home, we don't understand fully what is happening. When we grow up, we see it very, very differently. When we have children or when we're teaching, we see it differently. The beginning is, as you mentioned before, it's so important to have true self-love and true self-respect. Because when we don't have that, we're going to look through a lens of whatever we do have, which is sometimes not good. So love as a self-development is so critical to everything else. So I think that was an amazing question that you asked. And then realized that love is a development. In the beginning, love looks very, very different than what we see it later on. And we, as humans, will go through a transition, or we won't. And if we don't, that's not good. But when we do, we have true maturity, and we understand, and we have true love and true respect. Going into segueing in a bit into the education field, and there's different questions about a job and a calling and things like that. There's many different parts of education, and if there is an internal respect of where there's not just an educating or giving information, but there is the idea of grace, or creating the mensch, if you will, then by default that has love. And ultimately, a well-developed person who has a good balance of things, and a good balance in the home, and sees things for what they are, will come back and see that what they taught was what they learned was actually with love. There's a concept that says it takes 40 years to understand what your teacher taught you. It takes 40 years to distill it and to process it, because and that idea of 40 years, and the Jews being in the desert for 40 years because they received the Torah from God. It took 40. You'll be 90 years old and you'll have that epiphany. That's healthy. That's good. If we're restricted to what might have happened, even if it was adverse, even if it didn't seem loving, we're stuck at that point. Then we're 10 years old and our learning never developed. So I think the most important thing is that this is not so much, this is talking generally, because a teacher should have their responsibility. The teacher should see that as a calling. But this is not necessarily about lecturing about, how teachers, this is, kind of developing a broader picture on every level. And I think it begins with the individual. It's so important. It's so important that reflection and that understanding of what is going on. By and large, hopefully that there's a good balance in the house. There's a good balance in the school, and there's a good balance as we develop that three-pronged of our development and maturity, that we can see through what happens and see what was good and what was not as good, and see actually the truth behind
If I could just real quickly, in response to, I believe it was Sarah's comment, the job and calling. I heard someone say, we've heard this statement, find something you love to do that you will do it for free. Do it so well that people will pay you to do it. I mean, so calling is something you just love to do. I will do this for free. But the reality is that when you do something day in and day out and week in and week out, it can feel like a job at times. And so you have to pull back. Grace allows you to pull back to that calling, and allows you to pull from it, so that it covers the day-to-day grind of things, and allows you to operate in grace and in favor, and you're then able to give it out, so that you get replenished by the same grace that you're giving out again. We all go through that. No, I love this, and it everything that you love to do, it fuels you, it pours back into you. But as you do the grind, it could take from you, but grace allows it to be poured back. So just keep those avenues of grace open in your life, as a teacher, as an instructor, as a caregiver. Keep those avenues of grace open in your life, so when you receive, then you're able to freely receive, freely give. You're able to freely receive, and you're able to operate in that place of grace.
That's actually interesting. Yeah, I think that the real litmus test, and like you're saying, is that if you're able to receive from your students, that's really the test of if you're really giving them. I think Lisa also mentioned, and that we learn as much from our students as they learn from us, and that's probably the most powerful thing, is when we kind of have that sort of revelation and that depth from what we're teaching. Then yes, there's tremendous amount of love in it. Is it perfect? Well, that's the development. We have what is called the ethics of our fathers, which is the Mishnah, which was put together about 1800 years ago. And in that, there's so many teachings and directives that are there, and a lot of these thoughts and a lot of these concepts and a lot of these ideas that we're talking about. So a lot of these things are not new, but they are fundamental, and they're universal. And I think that's what's important today to remember, is that there's a certain universality, however, there's something in teaching, no matter what it is. There's a way that is done, is a proper way that it's done, and sure, there's ways that are not successful, and those benchmarks, whether it's, wow, I'm learning and I'm enjoying it because I'm receiving so much more from my students. It says I've learned a lot from my teachers, but from my students the most, which is I find that very profound. So someone who's really learning, really learns the most from the students, and is developing at that time. And maybe that can be sort of that thing in education. How much did you learn from your student today? The teacher should have that homework.
I just want to say, we ask these questions and we don't know which direction we'll go in, but the both of you have just touched on something that I think is profound, right? First, Pastor, you really saying, because when I saw Sarah's question, I immediately went to Jesus, and the reason why is because I was just thinking, like, if you look at Jesus, or you look at any of the men of God in the Old or New Testament, the one thing that they all experienced, I think, was in the extension of grace, they all had that moment where it just seemed like the world was beating down on them, and they were almost at their wits end, right? And so, Pastor, when you said like, well, the key to it is to tap back into the same grace that you are extending to others to sustain you. And then, Rabbi, you even took it a step further by saying that for educators, we need to be actively seeking opportunities to learn from our students and to receive grace from our students as a way of sustaining us. And I mean, you talk about light bulb moment that went off for me, because it almost felt like that's the ultimate expression of grace, right? Is not just to hold that power position of being the one who is always extending grace to others, but to be vulnerable and allowing yourself to receive grace from individuals that you may not necessarily have felt that they would offer you grace, right? So as a teacher, I see myself as being in charge of these young minds, but really these young minds are in charge of me, right? Like they are going to sustain me in the long run only if I allow them to. And so I just thought that was phenomenal, the way the both of you kind of broke that down for me.
Sure. I'll share one more story that is a biblical story where a woman is brought to Jesus, found in the act of adultery. In the law, it says she should be stoned. And then you very familiar passage of scripture. Jesus stoops, writes on the ground, and says, "You without sin cast the first stone." And from here it is, to the rabbi's point, it takes 40 years to learn some of the concepts that we've been taught over the years. From the oldest to the youngest, they each dropped their stone and went away. And so it's that concept, you without sin cast the first stone. And so recognizing that, yes, this is what the law said should happen, but recognizing that you've needed grace in your life also. And they recognizing that, yes, I need grace also. So may we all apply that to our life as we're applying it to the people that are in our care to teach. May we learn those same lessons to ourselves and reapply them over and over again. And that's how I believe we raise up healthy citizens and people with equity. We were talking back to equity and inclusion. We raise up people with those healthy mindsets that recognize that, hey, it has been extended to me. Let me extend it back to others likewise.
I want to add a little. When people ask sometimes, what does it mean? What does rabbi mean? A rabbi, loosely translated, means a teacher. And if you take that a step further, who was the first teacher? Who was the first rabbi? Moses. Moses is known as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher. One of the prerequisites that Moses had was his need for patience. I don't want to get into the entire thing, but that was a critical component, and that was tested on various occasions throughout his development. Moses only took the Jewish people out of Egypt when he was 80 years old. He wasn't a young man at all. It took him that long to develop that amount of patience to be able to do that, and then to receive the Torah and teach it to the Jewish people. It's a lifetime achievement. I don't think I achieve that. But again, if I'm 99 years old and I still have that ability to be amazed by something my teacher said when I was in grade school, or something else I learned, or be wowed by an interaction, or actually just hearing the reflection of something that I said, but then adding a different dimension to it, then the teaching and the experience and the environment and everything is in a good place and it's healthy. But there's a lot to there's many different parts to talk about, and then there's many, there could be many days and months and years developing this. But there are core fundamentals that we really keep to guide us, and that's what I try to look at, and to, whether it's inspire me or direct me or keep me balanced. And ultimately there's a success, and that ultimate success is the success of society at large. And I'm going to end over there because there's a certain success that got civilization to this point. It will always be a struggle, will always be a challenge, will always be a wrestling that we're doing constantly to refine that. But our existence here today is a testament to the success of the teachings with the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So we have about 15 minutes left, and I definitely want to give you all opportunity and space to just have some final thoughts in general. But I want to honor what Sarah wrote in the chat and what Michael just echoed as well, which is, she says, so what I'm hearing is that grace and love also serves as self-care for the teacher who gives it. And I think that is a phenomenal idea, because in the midst of everything that we're dealing with, we're in a pandemic. Many of us who are working in the field of education or social services, or just people who work with people, right? We have taken on even more responsibility, task, as we try to serve our community and the people that we're in charge of. And so it really just makes me feel like we all might have just gotten the secret to how to survive this moment in time, right? Like if we could just tap into some love and some grace, then that battery that I'm starting to feel is becoming depleted can actually be rejuvenated and sustain me through till we get to the other side.
Sure, the people work can be messy work, and it pulls from us in various ways. But again, recognizing that we're in an area that requires limits and boundaries and deadlines and instructions that have to be, targets that have to be met. But if we live by the sword, then we die by the sword. And so you can't allow it to pour back into you or fuel you if we don't act accurately and adequately operate in grace. And so that's our hope. And that's the only way to work with people, because we all have differences about us. Every situation is different. And God forbid we look at a group of students or an individual students and judge them all the same as the others. Everyone is unique in their own way, by their God-given fingerprint and personality, and so maybe we deal with them on that level, and that's grace.
Rabbi, any we might finish a little early, but Rabbi, any last thoughts for us?
Today, more than ever, what I find in these trying times on every level is really the test to the resilience of humanity more than anything else. And historically, civilization has gone through these things many times. every different part of it, whether it's every level of it, been there, done that. It's all recorded. The question is how are we going to come out on the other side? That is really the question. And that's the question I ask myself every morning. How am I going to come out on the other side? I'm not responsible for anybody else but myself. Am I going to come out on the other side with grace or gracefully or not? And that's truly the question we should all ask ourselves every single morning when we get up. Everything that is going on here, what am I going to be on the other side? This has happened so many times in civilization. You can open up the book. Every part of this is an exact carbon copy of what we are living through right now. Am I going to contribute myself, Elchanan Tenenbaum, with grace or not? And that's my choice. No one's going to tell me how to do it. No matter what comes up, that is my choice. That's each individual's choice. And I think that is the most important thing. And when some days I have some days are better than others. But when I have that and I'm conscious of it, those are good days. I'm in a good place. And the people around me are in a good place, not by my preaching, but by my actions. One of the greatest things about a teacher is not about what they teach, but it's about their actions. It's what they teach and the atmosphere of the teaching. We're talking about teaching. It's not about what they say or what's preaching. This is a big part of Jewish teachings and what is received by osmosis, what is received by being in there. It could be something very stark and very one-dimensional, and there can be so many other things, 3, 4, 5 dimensions of things that we are absorbing from that. Today we really have one dimension with the screens, but how do we add to that today? I think that's actually a challenge. How do we add so many more dimensions to what we have on the screens? That's a challenge. That's something that I try to be aware of as well at the same time. But the key, I would say, is that's in our hands, is before even our head lifts off that pillow, is what I am going to do if my day is going to be graceful or not. I have found that has had tremendous, tremendous impact on myself and the people around me.
So I just I want to end with some thoughts and a quote that I want to read from President Obama about what we've been talking about. In 2015, in response to the shooting that happened at the church, and oh my God, I want to say South Carolina. I should know this better, but President Obama said that grace is not merited. It is not something we deserve. Rather, grace is free and benevolent favor. By recognizing our common humanity, by treating every child as important, regardless of the color of their skin or the station into which they were born, and to do what's necessary to make opportunity real for every American. By doing that, we express God's grace. And the reason why I wanted to bring that quote into this, because I found myself really moved by what both the pastor and the rabbi have said to us this afternoon. Not once in this conversation have we talked about race. And for once, I don't think that is a bad thing. I think it's actually a good thing that we did not bring race or gender or sexuality or those divisive distinctions into the conversation, because we kept the conversation simply at a level of, in the words of the rabbi, how am I going to come out on the other side of this? Despite everything that may be a part of my identity, I think that is the challenge that we're all faced with, right? And to me, that's the brilliance of grace, is understanding, number one, we all fall short, and that if it wasn't for a little bit of grace, we wouldn't have the opportunities that we've had. But number two, starting with self, can I extend grace to self first? Can I extend grace to others? But you all added a dimension that I hadn't even thought about, which is, can I receive grace from others? And I think for me, that's at least that's the part that I'm going to take away as I walk away from this conversation, is who has been extending grace to me that I've been rejecting it from. Like, and the reason why I say that is because I just feel like personally, because I'm in a position of giving, I'm so focused on the giving part of it that I haven't allowed myself to focus on the receiving. I haven't allowed myself to really dive deeply into the love and the grace that others are showing me. And so on those days where my battery is running empty, I'm not able to rejuvenate myself and be the person that I know I can be, because I'm stuck in this I got to do it all myself kind of mode. And so if for anything, I appreciate this conversation for that, because it's not just about extending grace in school, but it is about receiving it and allowing ourselves to become the how do I say it, Rabbi? Mensch? Did I say
A
it
mensch.
correctly?
There you go. A mensch.
How
A
I become
mensch.
the mensch
I love it.
in this work. So we're like 5 minutes early, but sometimes I feel like it's okay to end early. Do you all have any other thoughts before we close it out?
If I could, that yeah, that you when you mentioned that, it brought up the story where Jesus was washing his disciples' feet, and he comes to Peter. He said, "Lord, you'll never wash my feet." And he says, "If I wash you not, we have no part together, no lot together. If you don't allow me to serve you in this low estate, in where your messes are, if you don't allow me in your dirty, smelly places to serve you, then we don't have no lot together. We don't have no part together." And that if you don't allow me to extend, if you don't receive this grace or allow me to extend this grace to you, then we don't have there's nothing going on there. And so, yeah, grace, it says, I'm gonna allow you to see my dark and dirty places and allow you to help me fix them. And that's great. So we have to be able to receive it as much as we're able to give it out, because again, it fuels us. So yeah, allow others to, walk into those places with you and help minister in those places that you don't let. And there's a few people that you just allow in those places, but if you don't have those people in your life, it makes life harder.
So I was going to invoke the mensch, but I thought it was lost. So I see you. The concept is there. I mean, you have it. So someone once said that, there's the man of the year or the woman of the year, or they have that kind of thing. So someone once said, didn't understand the whole concept. This is someone who's voted in the man of the year. So okay, the man of the year, and then what happens after that year? They're not a man anymore. And like you said, and I have, how do you pronounce your name?
Ijoma.
Ijoma. Okay.
Yes.
Ijoma said a mensch is the thing that we give the award we give each ourselves every single day, and every day of our lives. Was I a mensch today? Am I going to be a mensch today? So thank you for encapsulating it into the word, and I feel like my words were understood, actually. So thank you so much. You've been I've learned a tremendous amount from you by that reflection that has not only reflected, but it has deepened what I was trying to say in a level that I didn't even realize I was giving over. So thank you.
It is my pleasure. It has been a pleasure, Pastor, Rabbi, to have you all a part of this conversation today. This conversation has been a little bit different from the other conversations that we've had. But I tell you, for those that don't get opportunity to see this video, they really are missing out on the treat. We took the conversation to levels and places that I didn't expect. Just to give us a heads up, the tu.edu/diversity now series is on and cracking, as they would say, where I'm from. Next week, September 16th, we are talking about equicentricity. Wait, hold on.
Equicentricity. I'll bail you out there.
I was getting fumbled up on my words, but another great conversation that you don't want to miss out on. We have been having a dynamic time as we've been going through this, and so I just want to encourage those of you that have been participating to continue to come back. And if you can't come back, know that we're putting the videos out there. Also, I got to do this every week because they pay me big bucks to do it, as in big bucks. They don't pay me at all. But if you get an opportunity, sign up, take a look at our EDI program, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion in Education. We are going to make that program the best on this side of the Mississippi. So we want all to pay attention. And then again, Rabbi, Pastor, thank you for your time. I know you two are very busy during this time of the year, and so we appreciate you taking an hour out of your day just to spend and have a conversation with us.
Ijoma, this is Dean Norton. I want to just kind of say real quickly, because we didn't get a chance to do this. Rabbi and Pastor, from the bottom of my heart, was tearing up from some of the conversation we had because it got pretty deep for me. And you're both powerhouses in the communities that you serve within. And, you know, Pastor Harris, I met you 4 years ago through Leadership Vallejo, working with Grace Patterson on a project. I live in South Vallejo now, so I think that what you do for our kids in our community and what you do around equity, diversity, and just your grace and love that you give is so powerful and monstrous, you know, of what we need in Vallejo and to build healthy communities. And Rabbi, on our campus and beyond, you know, you've been my place of solace when I am having a really hard day. You know, I've come to you before and said, you know, help me get through this day, please, because it's been a difficult one. It's very ironic that today, when you look outside, it's one of the dreariest, darkest days that I've probably ever seen in my lifetime. But this conversation has uplifted me so much that, you know, right now I just feel the sunshine and the blue sky. So I appreciate both of you absolutely so much. And I know Dr. Schweitzer has been on with us and appreciated her questions to kind of drive us forth. I wish we had 500 people logged in right now listening to this, but I'm glad we recorded it, because I really think this is what we need to hear right now. Beyond just education, just as humans, you know, we need to remember and hear this, because it's a tough time in our world that we've never really experienced. And I imagine a lot of people are driven either back to their faith or questioning their faith right now. And so I really appreciate the time. I didn't know the conversation was going to go this way either. I was kind of thinking, oh, we're going to talk about, you know, the Vallejo community and educators and youth. And I think this was just amazing and powerful. So I just want to thank you both, for bottom of my heart, for agreeing to come. And hopefully you'll consider again. We'd love to have you back at some point.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We'll have a part 2. So with that being said, you all enjoy your the rest of your day. Tap in next week. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a bright day.
You too. Bye-bye.